My brother laughed so hard he nearly choked on his champagne. That was the moment I knew. Not the moment my father slid the envelope across the mahogany table toward each of us. Not the moment my stepmother's face went completely still. Not even the moment my brother tore open his envelope and held up the document inside like it was a coupon from a grocery store circular. It was that laugh. High and sharp and mean, the exact same laugh he'd used on me since we were kids whenever he thought I was being stupid. "Dad," he said, setting his champagne glass down on top of the paper without even looking at it, "is this your idea of a joke?" My father looked tired. He'd looked tired for months, but I hadn't let myself think too hard about what that meant. He was sitting at the head of the dining room table in the house where I grew up. The house in Naperville, Illinois, the one with the wraparound porch and the oak tree in the backyard that still had the rusted hook from a swing we'd had when we were little. He'd called it a family dinner. He'd made his famous pot roast. He'd asked me to come down from Chicago for the weekend, and I'd said yes because I always said yes and because some part of me could feel that something was shifting. "It's not a joke," my father said quietly. My stepmother, who had been my stepmother for 11 years and had never once called me by the right name on the first try, pushed her envelope back across the table without opening it. "Raymond," she said, in that particular tone she reserved for when she wanted to sound reasonable while being completely unreasonable, "I think we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," my father said. I wanted everyone to know at the same time. That's why I did it this way. My brother picked up his envelope, finally looked at it, and then dropped it again. "This is a trust document. You set up a trust." "I did, for her." He didn't say my name. He never said my name if he could avoid it. He just looked at me across the table with that flat, dismissive expression I had grown up trying to earn my way out of and eventually stopped trying. "For both of you," my father said. "Your trust documents are identical, same structure, same amount." "How much?" my stepmother asked. My father told them. The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. Not the silence of shock or surprise, but the silence of people recalculating. I watched my brother's jaw tighten. I watched my stepmother's hand move to her wineglass and then stop. I sat very still with my own envelope in my lap, unopened, because I had learned a long time ago that in this family it was better to wait and watch before you did anything. "Where did this money come from?" my brother asked. "It's mine to give. You've been hiding money from us?" Something flickered across my father's face. Not guilt. Something more like sadness. "I haven't been hiding anything," he said. "I've been saving for 30 years. Your grandmother left me some when she passed. I invested carefully. I didn't spend extravagantly." He paused. "Some of us don't." My brother stood up so fast his chair scraped back across the hardwood. "I'm not going to sit here and be insulted." "Sit down, please." "No." He grabbed his envelope off the table and shoved it into his jacket pocket, but I noticed. I always notice things like this, that he didn't crumple it, he didn't tear it. He put it away carefully, because whatever he was performing right now, he wasn't actually going to destroy it. My stepmother was different. She picked up her envelope. Hers was separate from my brother's. She'd received her own, and she looked at my father with an expression I can only describe as contempt dressed up as disappointment. "I've given this family everything," she said. 11 years. I moved into this house. I raised your children." "You didn't raise me," I said. It came out very calm. I wasn't trying to start a fight. It was just the truth, and it seemed important to say it at least once. She looked at me. My father looked at me. My brother, still standing by his chair, looked at me. "You were 19 when you married my dad," I said. "I was 20. I was already out of the house. You didn't raise anybody." The look on her face shifted into something harder. She stood up and she took her envelope and she did what my brother had not done. She tore it in half, then she tore it again. She dropped the pieces on the table like she was making a point, like she was proving something, like she had just won an argument I hadn't even known we were having. "Keep it," she said. She walked out of the dining room. My brother followed her, and just before he reached the doorway he turned back and said, "You've always been his favorite. I hope you're happy." Then they were gone, and it was just my father and me and the pieces of the torn document scattered on the table between us, and the pot roast going cold, and the oak tree barely visible in the backyard through the dark window. "I'm sorry," my father said. "Don't be," I said. "Are you okay?" He smiled at me then, a real smile, tired around the edges but real. "Open your envelope," he said. I did. I drove back to Chicago the next morning with the trust document in my bag and a feeling in my chest I didn't quite have a name for yet. It wasn't triumph, it wasn't relief. It was closer to grief, actually, the particular grief of watching your family show you exactly who they are and realizing you'd always known and just kept hoping you were wrong. I was 28. I worked in health insurance compliance, which is exactly as unglamorous as it sounds. I had a one-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, a cat named Biscuit, and a savings account I was very careful about because I had watched my father be very careful, and I thought if I did the same things he did, maybe things would work out similarly. I did not have a trust fund. I did not have family money. I had my salary, my 401(k), and the $43 in my wallet on any given day after rent. My father had set up irrevocable trusts for both me and my brother. The kind that are administered by a third-party trustee, not by us directly, not immediately accessible. Structured specifically so that neither of us could blow through the money the way my father had apparently been watching my brother blow through money for years. He'd mentioned a financial advisor in Naperville. He'd mentioned a trustee company. He'd told me to call them on Monday. I called them on Monday. The man I spoke to, I'll call him the trust administrator because that's what he was, asked me to come in. He said there were some things that needed to be explained in person. I drove back down to Naperville on a Tuesday afternoon. The office was in a low brick building near the downtown, nothing dramatic, the kind of office where people go to do paperwork that matters. The trust administrator was a quiet, careful man who wore reading glasses on a chain and had clearly been doing his job for a very long time. He sat me down and he said, "Before we go over the trust documents, there's something else I need to tell you." That sentence, the way it landed in the room. "Okay," I said. "Your father reached out to us several months ago," he said. At that time we walked through the full structure of what he wanted to establish. But there's a component of this that he wanted me to explain to you directly, rather than in front of other family members. He opened a folder on his desk and turned it toward me. It took me a minute to understand what I was looking at. The number it was a large number. Larger than what my father had said at the dinner table. My father had told us the trust amounts. He had not told us everything. "This is a second account," the trust administrator said. "A separate account that's been building for the past 15 years. Your father named it in a codicil to his estate planning documents." He paused. "He updated that codicil 6 weeks ago," I repeated. "Yes, why didn't he tell me at dinner?" The trust administrator looked at me for a moment over his reading glasses. "Because he knew who would be in the room," he said. I sat with that for a second, then I said, "My stepmother tore up her document. We're aware. What happens to that money?" "The codicil is specific," he said. "Any beneficiary who formally disclaims or destroys their distribution documents within 30 days of the initial meeting reverts their share to a charitable trust designated by your father. The money doesn't redistribute to other heirs. It doesn't come back to the estate. It goes directly to the charitable trust." I stared at him. He designed it that way on purpose. The trust administrator allowed himself a very small, very professional smile. "I'm not able to speak to intent," he said. "I can only explain the structure as it exists." The structure as it existed was that my stepmother had torn her documents. My brother, I found out later, from my father, had called his own attorney within 48 hours and filed a formal written disclaimer, apparently on the advice that this would allow him to contest the trust later. He did not understand, or his attorney did not explain clearly enough, that under the specific terms my father had established, a formal disclaimer had the same effect as destruction of documents. It was as a feature, not a bug. My father had sat with that trust administrator for months, making sure that every door my brother and stepmother might use to claw back money was closed and locked before the dinner ever happened. My father, who made pot roast and kept a rusted hook in an oak tree and looked tired, had been playing a very long, very quiet game. I cried in the parking lot of that brick building for about 10 minutes. Not sad crying, the other kind. I wish I could tell you the story ended there. I wish I could say my brother and stepmother accepted what had happened and moved on with their lives. I want to believe they were capable of that. But the part of me that grew up with them knew better. The calls started the week after I got back from Naperville. My brother called me 6 times in 3 days. I didn't answer the first 4. The 5th time I picked up. "You knew," he said. "No hello." "I didn't know anything until I went to the trustee's office," I said. You were always his favorite. You've said that before. It's true. Maybe he just paid attention, I said. Maybe that's the difference. He didn't have an answer for that. There was a long pause and then he said, I want to contest it. Okay. I need you to support the claim. I set my phone down on my kitchen counter and looked at it for a second. Biscuit walked across the counter, which I normally don't allow, and I let him do it because I needed a moment. I'm not going to do that, I said. He wasn't of sound mind. He made pot roast. He talked to us for 3 hours. His estate attorney has been working with him for 15 years. He was manipulated. Another pause. By you. There it was. There it always was. Every time anything in our family didn't go the way he wanted, the answer was that I had done something to engineer it. I had manipulated my father. I had gotten to him first. I had been whispering in his ear for years. I was somehow simultaneously both the least important person in the family and the one orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. It was exhausting. It had been exhausting for a very long time. I need you to think about what you're saying, I said. I need you to think about what you're getting while I get nothing. You got the same trust I got, I said. You chose to disclaim it, because I didn't know about the rest of it. Neither did I. He didn't believe me. I knew he didn't believe me, and I knew there was nothing I could say that would change it. Because he had needed the story of me as the scheming favorite for so long that the story had become load-bearing. If I hadn't manipulated our father, then he had just destroyed his own inheritance out of pride and spite. And that was a truth he was never going to let himself look at. He hung up. My stepmother's approach was different. She didn't call me, she called my father. She called him repeatedly, and from what my father told me later, in careful, measured language, the way he always talked about things that hurt him, she told him that she was going to pursue legal action, that she had consulted an attorney, that the terms of the trust were coercive and designed to entrap her, that a woman who had devoted 11 years of her life to his family deserved better than to be set up. My father listened to all of it. He did not argue, he said, call my attorney. She called his attorney. His attorney, who had also been working with my father for 15 years, and who had constructed that trust document with the specific intention of making it airtight, explained the same things the trust administrator had explained to me. The disclaimer clause was standard. The charitable trust provision was disclosed in the original document. She had the right to seek independent legal advice before signing anything, and had she done so, she would have been advised not to tear the documents. The fact that she had torn them without reading them was not a flaw in the document. It was a choice she had made. Her attorney apparently agreed. I never heard about a lawsuit. What I heard about through my father, in careful fragments over the following months, was the end of their marriage. My father sold the house in Naperville 8 months later. He moved into a smaller place in the same town, a condo near the library, which suited him because he had always loved to read, and the library in Naperville was genuinely excellent. He seemed lighter. I visited him more. We ate at a diner near his condo on Sunday mornings and talked about things we had never talked about before. His parents, my mother, who had died when I was 11, the 30 years of careful saving that had turned into what it turned into. Were you always planning it? I asked him once, over eggs and coffee. Planning what specifically? The dinner, the way you structured everything. He considered this. I'd been thinking about it for a long time, he said. I wanted to know who would be patient, who would wait and see before reacting. He turned his coffee cup. That's always been the difference between you and your brother. Not that I loved you more. Just that you learned to wait. He thinks I manipulated you, I know. Do you think that? He looked at me across the table with tired eyes and a real smile and said, You never asked me for anything. Not once. Not in 28 years. The only thing you ever asked me for was to call more often. He paused. I should have called more. I didn't cry at that. I stored it instead, the way you store things you want to keep. My brother did try in the end to file a formal legal challenge. He found an attorney who was willing to argue undue influence on the grounds that I had had more contact with our father in his later years, and had therefore had greater opportunity to shape his decisions. His attorney sent letters. My father's attorney responded to each one. The case never made it to a court filing. The documentation was too thorough, the timeline too clear, the charitable trust provision too explicitly disclosed for any claim of hidden terms or entrapment to hold up. The charitable trust, which my father had designated to benefit a literacy program in Illinois and a housing assistance nonprofit in Chicago, received its funding. I thought about that sometimes. The money that would have gone to my stepmother, and the money my brother had disclaimed, redirected by my father's long, quiet planning, into something that would actually help people. It seemed like something my father would have found satisfying. My brother and I don't speak now. I spent a long time feeling like I was supposed to grieve that, supposed to keep trying, supposed to be the one who extended the olive branch, because I was the one who had gotten more. I've stopped feeling that way. Some cheeses don't grow back no matter what you do with them. What I have now is Sunday mornings at the diner. A condo in Wicker Park that I bought last year finally, with some of the trust funds after the distribution schedule allowed it. A cat who is not supposed to walk on the kitchen counter but does anyway. A father who calls me twice a week now, who has started a book club at the Naperville library, who is reading more and sleeping better and laughing at things more than I ever remember him laughing when I was growing up. I didn't plan any of it. I didn't engineer anything. I just waited and stayed quiet and kept the envelope in my lap instead of throwing it across the room. Sometimes patience is not a passive thing. Sometimes it is the most deliberate choice you can make in a room full of people choosing noise. My father knew that. He'd been hoping I did too. Turns out, I did.